Okay, so I'm here with Peter Russell, the author of many books. Many of them were an inspiration to me, including From Science to God and Letting Go of Nothing, and a recent book, Forgiving Humanity. So Peter, I'm very grateful that you were able to talk to me today. So in this, and you discussed this idea of exponential change that will create a blind spot to how the future may look like. So perhaps you can give me a little bit about that. How do you, what is your perspective on this new
Oh,
age and where are we going?
okay. Well, firstly, I mean, yeah, I really dislike the term "new age." Always have done. It sort of started coming into common parlance, really, I suppose, in the um, late 70s, 80s, and I think people were a lot more optimistic then, and we were all very naive as well back then. I think it's like reality has set in. Um, Yes, and it was this idea of the age of Aquarius. If we just get our act together, we all just wake up consciously, then we can have a brand, bring in a new world, and we can all start behaving more sanely and lovingly. It's a nice idea. It's a nice idea. I don't see it's happening. I think the underlying idea that if we really free our consciousness from all our conditioning, our traumas, our expectations, all that stuff, then we can definitely become more aware, more loving, more compassionate human beings, which I think is great. It's great for us as individuals. It's great for the people we communicate with, and it will create a better world for us. I don't think it's going to take us off the trajectory we're on as a society or as a global civilization. And that's really what the book is about, is the trajectory. And it's about, as I say, exponential change, because we don't think exponentially. People talk about exponential change, but they don't realize how fast it's going and where it's going to take us. And because of that, the blind spot is we tend to think in terms of linear change, because that's what we're used to. If so much change has happened in the last 100 years, then so much will happen in the next 100 years. Even though we sort of know it's going to be 100 times faster, we can't think that way. And one of the examples I use in the book is Star Trek, which, when it came out, again, that was back in when did it come out? 70s, I think. It was, set several hundred years in the future. But the technology they had computers that could speak and understand verbal commands. We're there. I mean, we do it the whole time with Alexa, Siri, whatever. But, they don't take into account that that's going to happen so quickly. And the blindness is we don't see where exponential change is going to take us because we just think in linear terms. So that's the blind spot. And I think this is there throughout our culture. I mean, even now with, AI taking off and Chat GPT and all the other things and Mid-Journey and all the other apps that people are using, they don't see, think, oh yes, this is going to happen. Where's this going to be in 6 months? Where's it going to be in 2 years? We have no idea it's going so fast. And yet we're thinking, oh yes, this is going to happen in 5 years' time, would be like this. I mean, this whole sort of surge of AI for most people was completely unexpected. It happened so fast. And so that's the blind spot, really, that we can't see how fast things are changing.
So I was looking at ChatGPT. What is the elements of society these days? So it tells me that greed, corruption, short-term thinking, and uncontrolled technological advancement. For some reason, that's in the list. And for me, I thought perhaps it's greed, more importantly, the idea that we are separated from each other, and creates this idea that we are, we need to be greedy, to be more unto ourselves rather than to be open.
Yeah. So yes, I mean, greed certainly plays a dangerous but very common role in our culture, in Western culture at least. Um, but that may sort of accelerate the acceleration a bit. So, for example, Apple's now producing, virtual reality goggles. Do we need them? I don't see a clamor for them. I think they were right with the watch. The idea of a watch like a phone you could wear, that was great. People needed that. Do we need to be able to walk around the streets and have adverts popping up about the restaurant we're passing? We don't need that. But it's like they're caught on this thing. how can we make more money? How can we make more money? And this is a new thing. So, but the reason for the acceleration is not solely due to that. And what I point out in the book is there's a feedback cycle of innovation breeding innovation. Every new innovation, not everyone, but many new innovations, a new technology allows us to do more scientific research, which produces more knowledge, and we can then apply that to technology. And whenever you get a positive feedback loop, then things begin to change faster. It's one of the characteristics of positive feedback. It leads to exponential change. I mean, mathematically, you can show the equation very clearly. So the acceleration is something that's inevitable in any evolutionary process. And we can trace it back, millions of years through evolution, how things have got faster and faster. The interval, the beginning of life on Earth, it took 1 billion years for any significant change to happen. And then, when the arrival of mammals on the planet, it was taking millions of years. And now in our culture, it was happening in centuries, then decades, now years. So this acceleration is actually inevitable. It's intrinsic to any development. So, and this is where the forgiving humanity comes in. There's nowhere we went wrong in terms of acceleration. It's inevitable. There's nothing to blame ourselves for there. We may blame ourselves for, some of the crazy things we've done that have caused suffering, but there's no blame for this acceleration. It's inevitable. This is what happens to any, I call it technologically empowered intelligence. It'll evolve faster and faster and faster and faster and faster, winding up in this spiral, heading towards, some people call it the singularity. We don't know, but it's heading into completely unknown realms.
Hmm.
And really the point I'm making in the book, which lots of people have considered this. I mean, Ray Kurzweil, other people, lots of people looked at the acceleration, and mostly they're looking at where that's going in terms of technology in the future. There's another side of it, which is the stress that this acceleration creates for humanity, but much more for the planet. If you look at most of the crises now facing us, they have at their root or some factor which is exacerbating them, this accelerating rate of change. The planet cannot cope. And so at the same time as we're heading to having technology beyond our dreams, we're also in a world that's just breaking apart at the seams. It's just the two go hand in hand. And this is really what the book is about. The acceleration of technology and science go hand in hand with a breaking down of the system.
Hmm. Well, it seems that it's not a very optimistic message here.
No, it doesn't on the surface, no. And that's why it's, it's definitely not new age, not new age. But there's two things which I think are, one optimistic, another is somewhere beyond optimistic. But one is, okay, so that's the downside. Who knows where the technology is going to be in the end of this decade, 2030? Who knows where it's going to be, what we have available to us, what we can do. As I say, it'll be beyond our dreams. 2040, things will be accelerating much, much, much faster. And so we are going to have almost like magic at our fingertips, and that is an optimistic thing in what we might be able to do in terms of, healing the body, various other things. Who knows what will come? And as I say, we will also be dealing with a world that's breaking down inevitably. And then, so how do we deal with that? Do we just, deny it? Do we go into grieving, whatever? I see that as a chance to really, it's another spur to really wake up and look at who we are. How can we help each other through this? As a friend of mine, Meg Wheatley, said recently, and this is an exact quote, but when everything's falling apart, what's the point of doing good? And she said, that's the only thing to do. The only thing to do is to do good. And this becomes an opportunity to really awaken, to care for each other. So that's one aspect of it, that it may actually really promote human awakening in some ways when we really see, okay, we've got to actually shift our consciousness here. But also in the book, I see, the our civilization may not be here for a long time. That's a possibility. We may be winding up into something, who knows what will be like in another century. But to see this, we are this magnificent flowering of consciousness that probably happens once in, I don't know how often, somewhere in the universe this is happening somewhere. It's not common, but there's this flowering of consciousness, of creativity, of intelligence, and that is to be celebrated. We have to let go of the idea that we may be here for a long time, but still we can celebrate this incredible being that we are and all that we have done and achieved. So we're just letting go of the idea that because we are so magnificent, we have to be here for a long time. So maybe it's inevitable we're just here for a short time, but in the meantime, wow, isn't this
Hmm.
incredible?
But there's also this idea that we often people go out and protest and try to do good for, against, they have certain things that they want to achieve in their life, but it's all they always say it's about for our children, it's for the
Yeah,
next generation. How would I feel if I didn't do this for?
yeah,
But yet we're saying, but then what is the essence of legacy in our journey then?
yeah. That is, I mean, it's when we see what's happening in the world, I think even without the ideas I'm putting forward, it's really challenging for parents. I mean, I know people are deciding not to have kids just because the world is going so crazy. They don't want to bring children into this world. Um, the legacy, if anything, is really, I think it's about learning, awakening, acceptance of what is rather than resisting. I mean, protesting, yes. And it's not just to think about the future of children, it's often about what's happening right now as well. And there's a lot of things we can change in terms of let's call it mismanagement in general. And so I see, all of that is good, changing. If you want to say, when they look back, what would you have done? What would you have done 20, 30 years ago? And I think if we can see that in a way, we all did the best we could. We were trying, and the more we express love and things like that, then that is then a sort of message that's a legacy for others to follow. That's how I see it.
So the idea that because we try to do good in this world, but then somehow I feel like we're not looking at the future. This is like the spiritual message is never to look at the future, always be in the present. But yeah, there is a point in being prepared for the unpredictable.
Exactly. And well, first of all, being present doesn't mean don't look at the future. Being present, being
Tell me
present
more.
Being present in the spiritual sense means being present to your experience in the moment rather than being caught up in imaginary stories about the past or the future. So, which take us out of the present moment. But in the present moment, we can have serious concerns about the future, considering the future. I mean, that's how we make decisions in life. But it's not being carried away into just these stories which take our attention away. So being present doesn't mean you don't think about the future, but you think about the future in ways that are clear, that are not confounded by lots of distracting things, ideas going through our heads. So, and being present is, yes, that's the way we can be more in touch with our inner resources. So you had another bit you're asking there
I
now.
was asking about how do we prepare for the unpredictable in that
I want
sense.
to prepare for the unpredictable. Exactly. Um, I use the analogy of trees in a storm. If you look at trees in a storm, I used to live in a cottage in a forest, so I witnessed this so many times. A tree needs, first of all, it needs strong roots, which means, we need to be, the parallel there is we need to be rooted in ourselves so that we're not thrown around by every unpredictable change. It's like, oh my God, this is happening. What do I do? Oh, this is happening. We're going to have more and more of unpredictable events. It's like, but if we can remain calm, or not necessarily calm, but if we can remain stable and anchored in ourselves, then we can weather the winds of change much better. Uh, The second things that trees need is to be flexible, is to flow with the changes, flow with the wind. A rigid tree will blow down much more easily. So can we be flexible? If we're going to see unpredictable things, we need to be able to approach them with a fresh way of looking at things, not hanging on to, well, this is what I did in the past. Maybe something completely new is here, or, oh, I didn't expect it to be like this. Well, it is like this. So being flexible is going to be absolutely essential. And so both these things, I think, creating greater inner stability and greater flexibility in our thinking and our responses, all come from the more we can, well, be present, but also wake up to ourselves and not be caught up in all the conditioning and trauma we have. And a third thing trees need is, community. Trees on their own out in the wild will blow down, but in a forest, the trees break the wind for each other. They protect each other. And I think that
Mm.
is something that's going to be really important, is how do we care for each other? How do we, when things are changing, there's going to be a lot of emotional stuff, maybe material changes. How do we really care for each other through this process as it unravels? So that's going to be really important, which comes back, how do we have compassion? How do we have love? That's going to be more and more important, I think.
Mm. There's one thing that I'm always thinking about, or not thinking about much, perhaps, is death. And in that sense, we come here for a short while, and this journey is about perhaps creating an awakening. What do you think is the message here in terms of like why are we here and how to think about it in terms of our demise?
Yep. Well, I think, with individual death, I think something that comes up again and again is when people are suddenly faced with death, they may have, be in an accident or have some terminal disease or something. That can be a wake-up call. And they realize, maybe they're not so attached to money, that, love and compassion are more important. Fame isn't so important when it's coming to an end. You begin to value life in different ways. And I think that same potential is there as we realize, hang on, we may not be here for millions of years into the future. This sort of civilization may just be a flash in time. And through that, there could be a similar sort of awakening happening. So I see that as part of the potential here. The waking up, we can actually wake up to, let's say, be more compassionate, be more loving, not be so attached to our material things, so attached to money and fame. This is often, when you look at the way civilizations evolve and collapse, often, towards the end, they're so caught up in fame and money and being somebody and individuality. Um, and then you come through that, there's an acceptance that, hang on, this isn't really working. This is part of the demise.
Well, from what I've kind of read, Ellen Watts, for example, said that the universe never ends or never begins. It's always in a loop. And it seems that you are kind of addressing that it's coming soon, perhaps in a very quick way, that there's going to be an end. Does that mean, in the sense that there's a sort of like perhaps that the game was lost?
No, no, depends what you see the game as. I mean, it's not, what I'm saying is coming to an end is maybe the human species comes to an end on this planet. I don't know. Maybe this phase of a global civilization is coming to an end, and that's never happened before. And there may well be people who survive, but it'll be very different circumstances. But what is the game? I mean, that's the question. And you were touching upon this earlier, I suppose, when you were saying, I think you're hinting at what is the purpose of life. Um, and I think people see the game as, I think a lot of people see the game as, how can I be happier? How can I have more things? How can I get the things that make me happy, the friendships or whatever? And I think that's a very artificial sort of created game that isn't there in a lot of, more indigenous earlier cultures. And that's something that's been sort of conditioned into us. To me, the game, I mean, the purpose of consciousness is to be aware. I mean, to know. I mean, the word conscious comes from the Latin with knowing, to have knowing. And so if there's a game, it's about coming to a full knowing of the universe. Well, a full knowing for what we, this particular species, can know from this particular biological form and this particular time and space. And I find it fascinating that we are, in science, we are heading in that direction. We're not there yet, but we may find the unified field theory. We may finally understand, how the cosmos began, did it begin, whatever, these sorts of deep questions, quantum physics, what it's all about. We're sort of on the threshold of some very deep knowing here. And understanding consciousness, we're on the threshold of that as well. And part of that knowing is not just knowing about the world, but also that knowing of ourselves. And so if there's a game here, it's about maybe coming to a full knowing of the world and a full knowing of ourselves and how we function, and through that, that awakening of consciousness. So I see that as the game, rather than a game of how can I, fulfill my individual life. It's a much deeper game. And that's why I say, when I say, we are this incredible thing, this marvel of creation, to celebrate us, and maybe this is why we're here. And can we, maybe in whatever time remaining, can we reach that sort of fulfillment of the purpose of consciousness?
Tell me, what was the deep motive to write this book? What, or how did you come up with this notion, this path?
It's been there all my life. When I was a kid, I was a mathematician, and very early on, I got introduced to exponential change at school, and I was immediately struck by it and by the fact the human mind can't comprehend where it's going. But I was also, um, at that stage, fascinated by the future. And so way back then, what we're talking 60 years ago, I could see that exponential change was going to take us into, I mean, as I put it to myself then, impossible situations. And since impossible situations don't occur, something was going to break on the way in my own lifetime. And here we are, we're seeing things breaking apart. And I sort of, the idea crept into almost, not all, but almost every book I've written since then. The idea of exponential change and where it's leading has crept in. It was the end of my first book on meditation. It was the end of the global brain, the white hole in time, waking up in time. It's been there. And I suppose I did write about it with the white hole in time, which came out in 92. But I was still caught in this idea, it has to be positive. People want optimistic endings. And so I sort of didn't write about this side of it. And I just felt, now's the time, hang on. This is the way I see something here which other people aren't talking about. I see something which really needs to be considered. And so I decided, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be here, but I don't want to, die not having put out this idea about things. And
Hmm.
it's interesting, the reaction of people is either, some people say, oh, I disagree with you, can't go this way. Other people say, oh, I find a sort of sense of relief here. I've always intuited something like this, and you put into words something I haven't been able to express to myself.
Well, yes, I feel like we're always living in what I notice is very narrow focus of attention. Right now, I just see you. I don't see the room around me. I don't experience the entirety of it all. And sometimes zooming out is a wonderful feeling to kind of come to terms with some things.
Yeah.
And they say that like every time, every generation is not as great as the previous generation. I don't know if that saying has any validity, but perhaps this kind of points out to the idea that like we are slowly and then very fastly making it worse for ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we both, I think we look ahead to what we can be and look back to what we were. And we can see, looking back, oh God, things were better there. We were better. We've lost something, but also we look ahead to the future, but oh, things could be better. So I think we're looking for that the whole time, looking for how things could be better.
Okay, I feel like that was very insightful, and I'm looking forward to read your book entirely.
Okay.
And again, I thank you for your time and wonderful work, and grateful that you're able to spend the time with me. Thank you,
Thank
Peter.